at Shiloh, and we've met him earlier in other tours at Fort Donelson. His men are going to come down. He's not going to handle them very well, and his men are not going to carry this position here. Undoubtedly, he has been Simon Bolivar Buckner. Buckner undoubtedly committed him through orders from John from William J. Hardee. But Hardee has some aces in the hole. His aces in the hole will become more apparent. Now we'll forget about map 1. We will flip beyond Johnson, and we'll flip 2 maps. And now we can see everybody is beginning to smile when I mention Patrick Clayburgh. Again, you can see where we are. We're on the ridge here. The Union have been driven off this ridge, and we can see who is crossing in that same area, Pat Clayburgh, with his consolidated 5th and 15th Arkansas and 3 Tennessee regiments. Clayburgh riding his horse Dixie, and they're crossed right below us here. And start advancing up this slope toward us. Now, as we look over there, as we look toward Peters Creek, you can see those houses, quite a group of outbuildings. That is where the 150 is. And we can see coming down off the high ground there, we can see 4 Louisiana regiments and 1 battalion, commanded by Dan Adams. Screened by the battalion Austins, they moved right across the front of Sheridan. Sheridan is in a position he would lust for, they say here. He would lust like Larry Gibbs lusts for women. He would lust for that position later on, because he's sitting on the flank of John Adams' men as a fast directly in front. Band's playing. They're not trying to be secretive at all about what they're doing. And Sheridan is not, his career is about showing that maybe it should be the Sheridan principle, because he's holding to these orders in which he got his butt ripped, not to recall his men and not to advance. So he sits there like the proverbial bump on a log as the 4 Louisiana regiments and 1 battalion. We would see them, because where are they? As we look from here, hold your map like this, and initially they are on the far side of Doctor's Creek. We would see them coming across that field just to the south and west of the bottom bar now. And that's the field just beyond Doctor's Fort. And that's where they're going to cross Doctor's Fort. And they're going to turn the enemy's flank, turn the Federals' flank, as Pat Clayburgh assaults them this way, and you've got them in like a nutcracker. You have Loomis better damn sure get his guns out of here. The 15th Kentucky better get its act together in its counterattack, and the 3rd Ohio, because the Confederates have now crushed the Union right. That means you're going to have to get Loomis out of here. He's luckier than Symington. And soon as already you can see the burning barn over there, over here now. You can see the burning. Well, it depends. Let's see what we get out of here. It's the Backville Road, right in front of us. Out there where those cattle are. Out there on this knoll is where Bottom's barn is. And it's burning. And some of these wounded Yankees have taken cover in there. And you're going to have toasted Yank pretty fast. So you now have the Union position collapsing here. So I'm sure Will is going to have some wonderful quotes as it happens in here. And you can just imagine the Louisianans go into battle with their bands playing. Just, I guess, to say in your face to Sheridan, who is asleep at the switch. Will?
I think you got it all covered. Just wanted to make the point that there is a historical mistake on that Michigan monument. So see if you all have been paying attention, you can catch. That has told you what the mistake is if you've been paying attention. And I also want to put in a plug for that is the original Bottom house down there. And the barn, of course, is burned. The outbuildings are not historical, but the house is original. The fellow who bought that house and owns it is a great friend of Civil War history. His name is Alan Holweller. He lives in Cincinnati, and he was instrumental in beginning the preservation effort here at Perryville. He's a great guy, sort of unsung hero of the Perryville battlefield. And
Always seemed to be here on very important days. I was here when Louis Nunn transferred the 17 acres. Bought with land and water, and they were having a meeting of the Perryville Battlefield Commission. And on that day, at that commission meeting, Holweller signed the deed. And he came back ecstatic to say what he just did. Holweller got his ass chewed out by his father when he's a senior or a junior in high school. He borrowed the old man's car and drove down. And the old man was not happy about it. So here is a very important place to be. Now, we've got some options, and Will and I are going to chat them over right now. Because we've got our first thing that Will and I are going to hospital after the battle, suffered heavy damage, turns in a very complete claim for what he's lost, horses, sheep, and hogs, how many tons of hay he lost, how many bushels of grain he lost, all well documented, but he's going to be, the federal government, since he is deemed to be a Confederate sympathizer, he will not get paid for the feds.
This is the same Squire.
All right, you go over, gather around for Will. He's got some words of wisdom.
Well, I was just, while everybody was gathering, this is the same fella who buried the Confederates after the battle and who sponsored the Confederate cemetery up by the visitor center. This is the fella who owned most of the land on which the battle was fought. He was the richest guy in the neighborhood. And you look at that house, and it's a pretty modest building. That is a fairly typical Central Kentucky slaveholder house. There are a few big mansions like Cassius Clay's mansion that you'll see on Sunday, but not too many. They did not spend a lot of money on their houses out this part of the world. They lived rather modestly here. And the barn was just up the slope here. And Bushrod Johnson talks about let's see if I can find his description. In front of the brigade, he says, just below the crest of the undulation was a farmhouse with outhouses, orchard, and enclosed grounds. A rail fence ran nearly parallel with the crest of the undulation and to the left of the house, as he was talking. So that would be up here on the high ground where the 3rd Ohio would be located on the far right flank of the Union position. So we have now traversed from the federal left there at Parsons Hill and Starkweather Hill all the way down to the federal right down here above the Squire Bottom house. So we basically traversed the entire length of the battlefield north to south. And now, from now on, things are not going to go well for the Federals, because all of these delaying actions, repulses, stubborn withdrawals that we've talked about to this point is going to turn with, now Johnson's brigade is going to repeat that pattern. He's going to come down here, he's going to inflict about 40% casualties on the 3rd Ohio. The 3rd Ohio is going to take a terrible beating here, but they are going to stop Bushrod Johnson. And in repeating a pattern that we have seen elsewhere at Perryville, Johnson's going to take friendly fire from the Washington artillery located on the high ground just to the right of where you see the modern silo. Washington Artillery of Louisiana is going to be firing down here, trying to hit the Yankees, and they're going to hit Bushrod Johnson as he comes across the creek. So Johnson's brigade is not going to be successful. It seems like a repeat of everything we've talked about all day, of these brigade-sized Confederate assaults being repulsed by Federals on high ground supported by artillery. But as Ed has previewed quite well for us, the brigade of Pat Claiborne and Daniel Adams are going to change the equation, and they're the ones who are going to sweep past the house, up the hill on both sides of the road, collapsing Harris's Union brigade, collapsing those Union artillery batteries that we passed, and sending everybody back up to the north. And at this point, we'll pick up the narrative. The rest of our day is going to be following this Confederate advance up this high ground all the way to that crossroads. If he cuts off, if the Confederates take those crossroads, they're going to cut McCook off from his supplies, and perhaps the Confederates are going to gain something tangible out of this afternoon of fighting.
Any questions? Now remember, if we were here, if we are the 15th Kentucky or the 3rd Ohio, the first we're going to see, now we're going to have Claiborne coming from that way. You're going to be caught in a nutcracker. And coming over that ridge right over there are the 4 Louisiana regiments, screened by a battalion and their bands playing. So you're now caught in a nutcracker if you're Lytle's brigade. And you are, and the Confederates, your retreats will become more precipitate after this. And you're going to finally get some help. But the help is going to arrive just as it's beginning to get dusk. And you don't want to be with Goodling's brigade when it arrives. If you're going to get beaten up bad, and we'll get one of the great human interest stories of Bishop Pope. It's a lucky thing he's a divine, because a divine can probably figure the Lord will take care of him. The Lord does not at Pine Mountain, however. Okay.
Where's the stone wall?
Any questions?
Where's the stone wall? Where's the stone wall?
The stone wall was along, you can see the remains of it along the creek there. See, if you look there, you're the bank of the creek. See the remains, can you see it over there? Okay, we're going to load them up. On the ridge, just inland where we are. My recollection is it stood on the highest point in the ridge, just south of this road. It was a 2-story house, not in too bad of shape. First Rousseau, and then Chucklehead McCook will have their headquarters. This is where Rousseau, when McCook is gone, will make the decision to advance Loomis's battery down to Loomis's Heights to secure water and to bombard the Confederate dust clouds that they can see moving north. Now as we get late in the day, if you look at map, map. The map that says map 415. You can see the Russell House on map 415. Remember, always put your north arrow always in that direction. So we are at the Russell House, as you can see, and holding the high ground where we are is Wallace's brigade. Wallace is now in command of the division earlier today commanded by General Jackson. Jackson had been killed up by Parsons' battery in the fight on Starkweather Hill. Terrell had been mortally wounded. So William Webster is now leading brigade. It's a big brigade. Now remember, McCook has the troops engaged except for Sheridan's division and Goodling's brigade are the 13,000 men of McCook's brigade against 17,000. So Lytle is on this. So Webster is covering the position with his right anchored here along the high ground to our right and extending to and across the Mnt Road. He is in support of Harris's battery. 4-gun battery, which had pulled back here. Now the Confederate offensive has been carried forward initially by Pat Cleburne. Cleburne does not use the St. Andrew's Cross. In fact, many units out here did not use the battle flag. It is something the Army of Northern Virginia, Cleburne and the other units in Hardee's, or use a blue flag with either a round circle that can be either a silver dollar or a full moon on it. So if you're a reenactment unit, please don't carry the St. Andrew's Cross if you're emulating Cleburne's command or anything in Hardee's command. Cleburne will be wounded and go forward afoot. It's undoubtedly a flesh wound, but it kills his horse Dixie. But as they approach the area here, Cleburne's men, 3 Tennessee regiments and the consolidated 5th, 15th Arkansas have exhausted their ammunition. And coming up now to carry the ball for the Confederates is going to be, as you flip to your last map here, is going to be first the brigade commanded by Sam Wood. Sam Wood of Alabamians and Mississippians are going to be attacking from that direction against the Confederates commanded by our friend Webster. And Webster will be mortally wounded. So you've gone through the division commander, you've gone through the 2 brigade commanders, and the after-action report will be written by a staff officer who Will mentioned earlier today, not by one of the senior officers. They have all but destroyed the senior leadership of the division of General Jackson. But finally, Wood's men are beginning to get exhausted. Now what they have done, finally the first reinforcements have arrived. Finally, they're responding to the trouble up here. It is about 5:30 or getting near 6 o'clock, and Gooding's brigade is going to arrive. And in Gooding's brigade will be the 22nd Indiana, Colonel Squire Keith. They had fought at Pea Ridge. Now I want to hear a big huzzah out of the Illinois people here. Now arriving is the 59th Illinois that had fought at Pea Ridge, and they are armed with Colt revolving rifles. And last but not least is the 75th Illinois, and to relieve Harris's battery, they're bringing the 5th Wisconsin. The Wisconsin people, I want to hear a huzzah out of you, and I want to hear you do better than those candy people from Illinois who didn't give a very good huzzah. Huzzah! All right, Illinois and the 59th Illinois, where you guys are. Now do it, Illinois boys. Let's hear a good huzzah for you. Huzzah! You're doing better.
We're saving ourselves for later.
But you're going to be in for a tough jangle, because arriving now is St. John R. Liddell, a West Point dropout with 5 Arkansas regiments. The men that initiated the battle back at 6 a.m. when they were on over there watching by the Turpin place over there where we plan to start today, Peters Hill. And first, and again, without orders, the 10th Indiana is going to send a patrol forward. Yeah, that's down there before daybreak, looking for water for the horses and mules. And they find these pools of water in Doctor's Creek, covered with green scum, and if it's daylight, you're drinking a lot of fresh wigglers, which is fresh meat. And they advance and they find it open, and Sheridan, on his own initiative, will attack first with McCook's brigade, then bring up Leibel's brigade, and finally Gruzel's brigade, and 2 batteries, and finally force Liddell back in the crossbow run. So Liddell has been in reserve the rest of the day. He has moved through Perryville, passed across the chaplain at Perryville, went out and crossed at Crawford Ferry, and about dusk he arrives. Liddell deploys his 5 regiments on an arc confronting Gooding's brigade. He has no artillery support. Arriving here at this time is Bishop Polk. And we're going to let Will read it, but Polk is going to be convinced. Liddell tells Polk, there are friends out in front of us. It's now getting dark. And the friends are firing on us. So Polk is going forward and find out about the friends who are firing on them. It's friendly fire that Liddell is receiving. Well, we're going to find out that Will, when he reads it, is going to go, and Will, I'm letting him read it particularly because if he was more portly, we would all see him as Bishop Polk. And Will will go through the dialogue. They're going to find out they are enemies. Polk is going to have them identify themselves. When he goes back, he tells Liddell, those are the enemy. Give them hell. They're going to give them hell, and it's going to be very bad for poor Colonel Keith, Squire Keith, because he's going to lose his life, and his regiment's going to lose over half their men, and the Confederates are going to charge, and they're going to drive those Yankees from the Dixville crossing road. But it's getting dark as you fall back with the 5th Wisconsin Penny's battery, but you now hold the Dixville crossroads. We're going to have to do a chance that we don't do very often because of time and the fine cooperation we get of the locals here, because we're going to go on beyond the Dixville crossroads, which will be the first time I've ever done it with a group. Beyond there, but we got to have Will. Now think of Will, a man of God, and
Not hard
laid
to do.
aside his fight. It's a symbol of a
It's going to
bishop.
be willpower.
Take up a sword and go to war like the medieval bishops. Bishop Holt, we're ready for you.
All right. With that introduction, the bishop was frantically looking for his right quote. Not expecting to read it here. This is the bishop. Well, sir, it was at the Battle of Perryville late in the evening. In fact, it was almost dark when Liddell's brigade came into action. Shortly after its arrival, I observed a body of men, of whom I believed to be Confederates, standing at an angle to this brigade and firing obliquely at the newly arrived troops. I said, "Bear me, this is a very sad and must be stopped." So I turned around
I want to designate Colonel Keith. There's Colonel Keith.
Oh, Colonel Keith, all right. So I turned around and could find none of my young men who were absent on different messages, so I determined to ride myself and settle the matter. Having cantered up to the colonel of the regiment which was firing, I asked in angry tones what he meant by shooting his own friends, and I desired him to cease firing at once. He said with surprise, "I don't think there can be any mistake about it, for I am damn certain that they are the enemy." "Enemy," I said, "why, I have just left them myself. Cease firing, sir. What is your name, sir?"
I'm going to say,
"My name is Colonel Keith of the 22nd Indiana. And pray, sir, who are you?"
now you got to screw up your shoulder blades as you ride off.
Well done. Then for the first time I saw, to my astonishment, that he was a Yankee, and that I was in rear of a regiment of Yankees. Well, I saw that there was no hope but to brazen it out. My dark blouse and the increasing obscurity befriended me, so I approached quite close to him and shook my fist in his face, saying, "I'll soon show you who I am, sir.
Oh, he's
Cease
a rather
firing at
large
once."
man. He
I
speaks
turned
for
my
God.
horse and cantered slowly down the line, shouting in an authoritative manner to the Yankees to cease firing. At the same time, I experienced a disagreeable sensation, like screwing up my back and
Screw up your
calculating.
back now for us, Will.
I hurt my back. I can't do that.
I can do it.
All right, you do it. All right, very good. How many, and was calculating how many bullets would be between my shoulders at every moment. I was afraid to increase my pace until I got to a small copse, when I put the spurs in and galloped back to my own line. I immediately went to the nearest colonel and said to him, "Colonel, I have reconnoitered those fellows pretty closely, and I find there is no mistaking who they are. You may get up and at them." So I ordered Liddell's brigade, probably only the 6th Arkansas and a portion of the 2nd Arkansas, to cease firing and to promptly load their guns, and for no man to pull a trigger or fire a gun unless he had a dead aim on a Yankee. Every one of them was loaded. I ordered the firing obliquely to the left, and when they did fire, nearly 3,000 muskets blazed as one gun. That's something of an exaggeration. And I assure you,
They were
sir,
hub to hub.
that the slaughter of that Indiana regiment was the greatest I had seen in the war.
Give Will a big hand. So there you now have the
I'd hate to see tepid applause.
Now remember, it's dark now when the Confederates seize the Dixville crossroads. If they'd seized it early, it would be disaster. But it's dark now, and we're going to do now what I've done alone, but never with a group. Go out where the battle is, where we're going out where Starkweather is. Any questions?
Yeah, and you said that Lytle was a West Point dropout. Did he drop out because of the war or before the war?
I didn't say Lytle was a West Point dropout. I said somebody else was a West Point dropout. McCook.
No.
Liddell.
Daniel McCook's a West Point dropout.
No.
That is Sherman's brother-in-law and Dan and fighting and Chucklehead's brother. So as I say, unless one of the locals has seen this house, that may be one of my claims to fame of seeing the Russell House.
Burned in 1964.
It burned in 64. I was here in 62 and saw it in 62. And we will now.
Well, they gave that up actually really good. So the works are still out there, and you can certainly tell that the road was a government road by the way that it's designed differently than the other two, but it's not owned by the park.
That's the old road from Macville. That is how General McCook will arrive here. He spent the night of the 7th and 8th at Macville. He is not, as you would expect from a man with a nom de guerre of Chucklehead at West Point, he does not start early on the 8th. And it is going to be fairly late in the morning or approaching the noon hour before he reaches the point on the Macville Road where we can see that historical marker. See the Macville Road up there? You can also see it on your map. It is labeled with the heavy black line. Remember, this way is always north. We are at point 25, and we can see the Macville Road coming in. And the road along that ridge line is how you, by riding less than 3 miles, if you've got your car, in about 3 minutes, you can be at the Dorsey House. That is where McCook went, where he reported his arrival here. So McCook has reported to Buell at the Dorsey House his arrival. In his absence, despite his orders to remain on the high ground to our front, to your front, to my rear, Rousseau has advanced Loomis's battery and supported by Lytle's down to that position overlooking the battery. So we do have the troops. Yeah. Everybody is together now.
Whitman's Corps is arriving.
All right.
Mechanized infantry.
Okay. I did not know they were coming. So we're coming, Father Abraham. 500,000 strong. So I will hook up to the other shed here. Comes in on that ridge where we are not going up to. As I look south here from me, about 200 yards. When Rousseau gets here, he is going. This is the route he is going to send Starkweather, because he and Jackson are co-equals, and Rousseau is going to tell Starkweather, take your brigade and take the 2 batteries and proceed to the Wilkinson House. The way we're going now is to the Wilkinson House. And then when he gets to the Wilkinson House, Starkweather will advance up to that position where we first encountered him. McCook at this time has ridden down, if you're driving in a car, probably 3 minutes down to that road that goes along the ridge will take you down to the Dorsey House. Someone asked me, how fast can you ride a horse? And I used to go to school. If my father was not keeping time or watching me, I could ride a horse 6 miles in a little under 1 hour. Well, that will give you, of course, I would be lighter than Chucklehead because he's much larger than a boy that's 11 years old. So it would not take very long as he goes down to meet and come back and find out that Rousseau is advanced. So to understanding what is happening, I think it's whether giving some use to this trail. I've walked this trail alone, but I've never had a group here. Will may have had a group down here, but we neither one generally take groups down on this trail. And since it's a Chicago Round Table and a bunch of vigorous young men and women, we decided to let you see something when you see other Round Table members and ask if they've ever been down to the Wilkinson house, and they give you a confused look, and you say, I have. I'm going to turn it over to Will for his remarks, and then we will head down to the Wilkinson house. When we get down there, we'll see the remains of that stone wall that we talked about.
I think I'll save my remarks for the Wilkinson house site. I'll save my remarks for the Wilkinson house site.
All right. Now, if you have your map, remember, it is the one late in the day. Keep your north arrow that way. We're at stop 25, and now we're going down to the Wilkinson house. So we're going to walk from 25, and it's going to be a rather short walk down to the Wilkinson place. And it's Confederates get. This is how far Maney and Stewart are going to get. And the middle, and about 4:30 or 5 o'clock before they're finally checked. That's after they have driven those Yankees from Parsons Ridge. They have driven them from the position of Bush and Stone on Starkweather's Ridge and driven them all the way back here where the Yankees will stiffen and force them to fall back. So I think it's, I'm glad we had this extra time, and now I can just see John here. You're not riding the tractors, are you?
No.
This man, what can you tell Gibbs?
Did the walk.
Yes. General Terrell. We can see the Wilkinson house would be in this area here. Up ahead of us is the stone wall. You can go up there and stand on that fence line and look at the stone wall. The stone wall shows up
All this way.
at the edge of the closest sheet. Right over here. You're going to see it. It's pretty well. I tell you, at one time you could see it up there, but Kurt said in the years since he was superintendent here, much of the stone wall has disappeared. They're right in the distance.
Yeah.
Oh, over there.
That's what they say.
What? All right, we are. Have your map pointed just like that, and there is where we are. There's where we are. Now, if you want to see where the rebels are, let us turn a page, and let's see where the rebel high water mark is. There we can see the stone wall. There's the Wilkinson house. There's the stone wall. And who's right out in front of us? Maney and Stewart. So what has happened? On the third attack, the Confederates have stormed Starkweather Ridge, captured half of the 12 guns of Stone and Bush, and they're going to fall back to that stone. Well, you forgot where we are?
Yeah.
Fall back to that stone wall immediately in front of us. According to Kurt, the stone wall, when he remembered it originally, extended along that ridge. Continued on, but it's disappeared. The farmers, particularly who owned it at one time, probably wanted to get rid of the stone wall to disarm the desire of those Civil War nuts that want to acquire all of the property. So the stone wall only partially exists. So just think if Starkweather had not fallen back here. think if they had been successful, if Maney and Stewart had been reinforced, but there are no reinforcements to give them. If they could have pushed on from here and over that high ground right over there is the Dixville Crossroads, right up there. Think if they had carried this position here, the end, that would be the end of McCook's 2 divisions. But they stand tall here. And that means the Confederates fall back to Starkweather Hill. Starkweather Hill indicated by that single cedar we can see on the next high ground. Now we'll let Will give us some thoughts of what the people think at the time of the Wilkinson site. And you can go back to Chicago and talk to other groups and find out if they were ever at the Wilkinson house. My odds are they're going to say no. You say, well, I was there. So you didn't really see the Battle of Perryville. You saw the Wimps tour of Perryville. Any questions? Will, anything?
Well, I'm over here.
All right, there's Will. Turn around.
I think
Will can outmaneuver me. Good thing he's not a boxer.
I think we have pretty well covered the combat at Perryville on October 8th. We've seen what, as I say, one very knowledgeable historian, Kenneth Noe, who's written this wonderful campaign history for Perryville, has indicated as the high ground, the high water mark of the Western Confederacy. And I tend to agree with him. I'll just say editorially that I've never really been persuaded that the summer of 1863 was the military turning point of the Civil War. No offense to Gettysburg and Vicksburg fans, but I have always felt that the offensives in Maryland and in Kentucky in the fall of 1862 marked the last time that the Confederacy had a chance to win a military victory, not to establish their independence, which I think was still possible until Lincoln's re-election, but a military victory, I think, was ended here in the fall with the defeat of Bragg at Perryville and Lee at Sharpsburg. And so we've all been to Sharpsburg, and we've all been up there along the Harpers Ferry Road and seen the near thing that the Confederates achieved in Maryland, and having to fall back across the Potomac. I think the mirror image out west is right here between Dixville Crossroads and the Wilkinson House site, marking the last points as farthest that the Confederates get on the night of October 8th. Because after this battle is finished, and it's concluded by darkness, it's not concluded by a lack of troops on the field. Darkness ends the fighting. That's when the Confederate High Command meets back at the Crawford House, which I assume will pass and point out to you. Those of you in my bus, I think I was yakking about something else and I missed the Crawford House. So we'll be sure to point it out. Ed probably pointed out on the way into town. This is where Hardee and Polk and Bragg will sit down and put 2 and 2 together and understand, wait a minute, they're facing an entire Union Army. And the time is now to get out. So orders go to Kirby Smith, who is north of us, to withdraw back towards Harrodsburg. That night and the next morning, Bragg's army here at Perryville will withdraw towards Harrodsburg, with Bragg's initial intention to make a stand there, but he quickly changes his mind and decides to follow a retreat route which he had planned. He had told his subordinates to establish supply depots at Old Camp Dick Robinson, which he renamed Camp Breckinridge, and at London, Kentucky, where we'll be tomorrow, and near Cumberland Gap, if necessary, as retreat routes out of Kentucky. And I would just say that I think that Bragg was glad to get out of Kentucky. What was his purpose? I mean, can anybody really tell me what was Bragg's strategic intention? And at what point was that intention null and void?
Popular uprising.
I would agree with you. I would say that that is the number one plausible reason why Bragg agrees to go into Kentucky and follows Smith, who was the one who disobeys the plan to come in there in the first place, was to accommodate the 25 to 30,000 would-be Confederate recruits that John Hunt Morgan told Bragg would be available in Kentucky. When only 2,500 rallied to the Stars and Bars, at that point, Bragg's thinking, in my view, what am I here for? Why are we here? And he was just as glad to get out of Kentucky. And so off he goes. Buell will follow, but not with great alacrity and with no particular success. And his pursuit will be sufficiently slow as to provide yet another opportunity, the final opportunity, to get rid of it. And to name in his place William Stark Rosecrans to command the army out here, who had been victorious in several days before the Battle of Perryville down at Corinth and Iuka in North Mississippi. So this leaves the Perryville area in the backwash of the war for the rest of the Civil War for all practical purposes. But I'll just conclude my remarks with a couple of descriptions of what the landscape looked like on the night of October 8th and the morning of October 9th, after all these hundreds of Americans had been wounded and killed out on the battlefield. A soldier from Texas wrote that I was without a bedfellow on the night after the battle, and as the nights were frosty, I looked out for some other person to get the benefit of his blanket for a covering, while mine should be spread on the ground for a pallet. We only had one blanket each, hence the necessity of having a partner. Many dead of both armies were lying around. The wounded had been removed, or most of them. I found Sam Woodward of my company with a good blanket and no bedfellow for the night, and we soon arranged to bunk together. I said, Sam, you look for a place as smooth as you can find, and we'll fix for a bed. In 15 or 20 minutes, he came back to me and said, I found a fairly good place, but there are 2 dead men on it. I said, they are as dead as they will ever be, are they not? He said, yes. I said, then we'll remove them a little space and occupy their place. He said, all right. And we went to the spot selected and turned one man over one way, the other way. They were lying parallel with each other and made our bed between them. One dead was a Confederate and the other one a Federal soldier. Some of our boys, nearly barefooted, were searching around among the dead for footwear. Mullins of Company D found a good pair of boots on another ranger who was asleep among the dead. He immediately decided the boots would suit, grabbed one of them, and jerked it off Wheeler's foot. They aroused Wheeler to consciousness, and he called out, what the hell are you doing there? Nothing, damn you, I thought you were dead and I needed those boots. A little less humorous, 2 shorter descriptions for you. An Illinois soldier wrote that on a rocky spot in the bed of the creek I saw 4 or 5 dead bodies, their clothing apparently officers of the enemy. These had been cared for to the extent of the building of a rail fence around them. And I think you'll maybe understand why that happened. So as to protect the remains from being attacked by the swine who prowled the woods. The disgusting sight of these animals feeding upon human gore was more than sufficient to give them immunity from the hungry of our army. No one could be found sufficiently hardy to talk of eating the flesh of hogs captured near the battlefield. And another Indiana soldier, lastly, in several places the rebels had piled their dead like cordwood and enclosed them in pens made of fence rails, but most of them were scattered about the field and many places commingled with the dead and the dying of the Union Army.
And of course, as he mentioned, Rosecrans. Now with a far fewer numbers involved, but about the same number actually engaged, Rosecrans had beaten Van Dorn much worse if we're talking about killed and wounded. The bloodiest battle in Mississippi is not any of the battles associated with the Vicksburg campaign. It's the Battle of Corinth, where out of 22,000 men, Van Dorn will lose 4,500 on the 3rd and 4th, and Rosecrans will lose about 2,300, and Rosecrans winning at the Battle of Corinth, which is a corollary of this in the West, but not in Kentucky, where it's more important. Rosecrans will become commander of what was the Army of Ohio, and he'll redesignate the army that comes. So after this, in fact, I think I said it in Ken Burns, and that's where I got in good with Kurt the first time I met him, because I was the only person in the 5 nights of Ken Burns that mentioned the Battle of Perryville. And I did not realize it till Kurt told me, and he's been a great friend of mine ever since. Nobody else, even Shelby Foote, who likes all Confederates, but the Confederates didn't win the Battle of Corinth either. They strategically lost this, and even Shelby Foote did not mention Perryville. Any questions? We better go.
What were the final casualty counts on both sides, just roughly?
Well, roughly 4,200 Union casualties, dead, wounded, and missing, and about 3,400 Confederates in round numbers. So take 4,200 and take 3,400. I probably have 100 because I gave the round numbers to the lowest thing. You'll get the total.
It's pretty good for one day, 5 hours.
Yeah, it's only a 4-hour flight.
Pack
That's what
will be
turned out.
visiting Mill Springs, which are marked maps. 14 and 15, 16 and 17 this afternoon.
Get that door, Mac?
Oh, that one. Oh, you know what it is?